I am Francis Fies Villespina and I am the next reporter. I'm here today to discuss the ASEAN and the lingua franca approach to the teaching of English. But first, what is lingua franca? The term lingua franca is commonly used to describe the present position of English. So the lingua franca role of English, coupled with its status as the official language of ASEAN, has important implications for language policy and language education. This includes the relationship between English, the respective of national language of ASEAN, and thousands of local language. So there are 5 principles underpin English as a lingua franca approach to the teaching. The first principle is the native speaker is not the linguistic target. The goal is a mutual intelligibility and the ability to use English successfully in multilingual context. So here in the first principle, greater focus on mutual intelligibility, so it can be unified. In this way, adopting these targets has important implications. The first one is, as a target is not developed native-like proficiency, the perceived importance of the so-called critical period can be discounted. When English is being used as lingua franca, the accent people use will represent their identity. Singaporeans will sound like Singaporeans, Filipinos like Filipinos, and Vietnamese like Vietnamese. Being a native speaker is not itself a guarantee of mutual intelligibility. Indeed, there is a growing body of research that indicates that speakers of new varieties of English can communicate even more efficiently in certain contexts than can native speakers. Now let's move on to the second principle is the native speaker's culture is not a cultural target. The goal is ASEAN-focused intercultural competence. One way is to adopt a goal that aims to provide learners with ASEAN-centered intercultural competence, allows the English language curriculum to introduce a range of ASEAN-related cultural materials. Of course, one could not expect a single teacher to be able to teach all these cultural aspects, but the focus of the materials to be used could be on developing intercultural competence among the leaders. So what is intercultural competence? And here is the example. It must be self-knowledgeable, intercultural communication, attitude of modesty and respect. And also, in the last one is the understanding of the concept of cultural. Now let's move on to principle number 3. Well-trained local multilinguals provide the most appropriate English language teachers. So when you say multilinguals, it can speak more than. So here simply underline that local multilingual teacher not only provide good role model for their students, they also provide the most appropriate linguistic models. Sharing the same or similar linguistic backgrounds to their students, there is the accent which will be acquired by their students, and this accent will give them their identity as speakers of English. Next, the fourth one is lingua franca environments provide excellent English language learning environments for lingua franca speakers. It is generally assumed that the best way to learn a language is to go where the language is spoken and become immersed in it. In many cases, of course, this is true. One of the examples is sending Indonesian students to the Philippines to improve their English might be more successful than sending them to Britain. One reason for this is precisely because there is none so-called native speaker experts around. Instead, their Filipino interlocutors will be fellow multilinguals with high proficiency in English and with whom communicating in English as a lingua franca will seem natural. In addition, of course, the Indonesian students will learn a great deal about the cultures of a fellow ASEAN member state, and the Filipinos will also learn from their Indonesian visitors. And the last principle is assessment must be relevant to appropriate for the lingua franca approach and curriculum. This is clearly no point in adopting the other principles outlined above continues to access students according to native speakers, norms, and cultures. Assessment must be clearly aligned with what being taught. This means that Asian students need to be assessed on how successfully they can use English in Asian settings or indeed in other lingua franca contexts. Let's focus on intercultural communicate skills and suppose focusing on the target culture. So in our case, since English is a lingua franca, is an international language, then it is much more important as an individual ability to navigate our way in between cultures, different first language, and different people. And the next reporter will be Miss Durong. Thank you and God bless.